So 2 years ago, Spider-Man Far From Home broke me.
Sick? Heartbroken.
Now I'm about to go see No Way Home.
Fuck you, hating ass nigga! Don't nobody give a fuck what your dumb ass think. Give me this motherfucker. Get your ass up out of here, yo hook ass nigga. Them tires, punk ass, pussy ass nigga. Fuck up out of here with that bullshit. Beat it, nigga.
So the long-awaited Spider-Man No Way Home has finally arrived, and it was exactly what I expected. You see, I expected a movie with a story that was really just there to get you to the awesome moments that you wanted to see, and that's basically what we got, along with a few things that really surprised me, which isn't a bad thing at all. I had a blast with it. It's a very fun movie. So No Way Home picks up right where Far From Home left off, with Mysterio revealing to the world that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. And because of this, Peter and his friends' lives are kinda ruined. Because of their association with Spider-Man, they can't go to college, and Aunt May and him are getting harassed at their home. So Peter goes to Doctor Strange to see if there's a way they can change what Mysterio did. So Strange casts a spell that makes people forget that Peter is Spider-Man. But because of Peter tampering with the spell as he was casting it, it messes up and instead starts bringing villains from other universes. So now he has to capture them and send them back. So I'm gonna do this review in two sections. One spoiler and spoiler free. In the spoiler free section, you're gonna get my overall thoughts about the entire film. And then in the spoiler section, I'm gonna talk about specific events and moments. So without further ado, let's get into it.
So who the fuck you motherfuckers gonna run to when someone runs up with a mask and puts a gun to you?
So I had a lot of fun watching it, although it's not perfect, and there are several things that annoy me personally, or I think weren't handled that well. But I'll cover that in a bit later. But first let me tell you what I liked. So the action is a lot of fun. There's some really good creative sequences throughout the movie. The bridge fight is awesome, and the section where Strange and Peter are fighting in the mirror dimension is great, and the fights between Green Goblin and Peter are my absolute favorites. So unsurprisingly, the action is good and a lot of fun. I do have a few little gripes about certain things that happened during the final battle, but I'll go over that in the spoiler section. So overall, it was very entertaining in that regard. Also, it was great seeing some familiar faces from the previous Spider-Man franchises. The villains are here for a decent amount of time, and I thought they handled the fan service pretty well. They just don't make an appearance and then disappear, or only here to get a cheap pop from the audience. They actually give them some decent motivations and screen time, like Norman Osborn and Doc Ock in particular. And the way they worked them into the story was decent enough and was a nice mix-up. Now, are there winks and nods to the audience? Yes, there are a few here and there. Like a character will say a line and the audience will get a chuckle at it, but it's never too distracting. And without spoiling anything, there are several moments and interactions throughout the whole movie, mainly in the second half, that were just great to see. So in terms of fan service, this is how you do it right. It's more than just a, hey, remember this guy? Or how about this? Funny, right? It never felt like it overstayed its welcome, so I think it did a good job in that regard. Speaking of which, Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin is amazing. He was really having a blast the whole time, and he was so damn entertaining. He really was my favorite character in the whole movie, further solidifying his Green Goblin as my favorite Spider-Man villain. And I think the MJ and Peter Parker relationship here feels so much better than it did in Far From Home. In Far From Home, it felt like they were rushing the relationship, so to me, it didn't feel organic, which is ironic because Zendaya and Tom Holland were dating in real life at that point. So I thought it was strange that the relationship didn't feel real to me. Probably because they shared very few interactions in Homecoming, and then the sequel forced them together pretty fast. But here I think it feels much better. And I think the music was pretty good, but that's because they were reusing Danny Elfman's score at several moments, so it was really nice hearing it again. Now the ending in particular is really interesting, and I actually can't wait to see where Tom Holland's Spider-Man goes in the future. I'll touch on that more at the end. So there's a lot that I enjoy, but there are several things that really did annoy me. The first being the forced MCU jokes. You saw it in the trailers, and there's more of it in the movie. And I just rolled my eyes several times at these parts. Although at least they pull back on the jokes in the more serious moments, which I did appreciate. And there are several funny interactions later on that don't feel forced, so it's really the first half of the movie that has all the MCU-esque quips and forced jokes that we've seen a dozen times at this point. I will say that it's not as bad as Black Widow's forced humor though. And something else that I noticed was some weird editing choices, as well as some pretty wonky looking green screen and CGI. I think that's due in large part of being filmed during a pandemic, so they had to film a lot of the actors separately from each other, and then edit them together as if they're in the same room. But there are several times where you can clearly tell that they're not. Like this scene where all the villains are talking to each other, and Tom Holland and his friends are just standing there listening and having a few reactions. It just feels weird. This happens several times throughout the movie, and once you notice it, it's kind of hard to ignore. Now, it's not terrible or ruins the whole movie, but it's something that I noticed. Another thing that really annoyed me is that, like other MCU movies, they change characters to have them act a certain way so that events in the movie can happen. Like Doctor Strange seems a bit reckless here, with having no issue with casting a spell that can literally affect everyone in the world, and Wong in the trailer tells Strange not to cast it, but in the actual movie, he tells Strange to leave me out of it. Also, Wong is Sorcerer Supreme now, so it's pretty dumb that he barely attempted to stop him. Well, I guess if he did, then we wouldn't have a movie, would we? Similarly, Peter Parker makes a decision that kind of makes him seem dumb, like in Far From Home. They had Peter do something here that doesn't seem smart. The reason for it is because if he didn't, then it wouldn't be a movie. Strange actually points it out to Peter after it happens, but that doesn't make it any less dumb. Also, this last one is a personal thing, but I think the color grading here is kind of flat and boring. It looks similar to every other MCU movie since 2014-2015, and it's just pretty dull. Outside of a few scenes, it's not a visually pretty movie. The colors just seem very muted. I guess this is done to make them all feel like they're in the same universe, but to me personally, it's really dull. I would like to see something more visually interesting. And that's my general overall thoughts on the movie. Now we're going to go into the spoiler section. I'm going to talk about a few specific things. If you want to avoid spoilers, go ahead and skip to the timestamp here so you can hear my conclusion.
Fuck plans, I'm silencing them all. I'm involved in murders forensic science couldn't solve.
Okay, so now that we're talking about spoilers, I want to circle back around to the fan service. Yes, both Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire are here, and I loved seeing them. My favorite parts were seeing all the Spider-Man interact with each other. Now, they're not in the movie long. They have a few scenes before the final battle, then another after. So they're here for a decent amount of time, but not enough to take away from the main story or conflicts that Tom Holland's Spider-Man is having. But it was great seeing them talk and interact with each other, and honestly, I would watch a whole movie with them just bullshitting around. Also, Andrew Garfield really stole the show. He just looks so damn happy to be here, and it was great seeing him back in the suit. So they all share several scenes together, but they never really overshadowed Tom Holland, which again, this is how I think you do fan service right. So yeah, seeing all three of the Spider-Men was great. So there's a very important moment where Aunt May dies, and though I thought the moment itself was very important, I do think it was handled kinda weird. Basically, Green Goblin's glider rams into her, basically breaking this bitch in half, and you're shocked because you think she's dead, but then she gets back up and is walking around, and she gives Peter the whole "with great power comes great responsibility" speech. Then she collapses and dies. It's a very pivotal scene, an important moment for Peter, but the way it was handled kinda made me laugh. I think Tom Holland's performance throughout the whole movie, and this scene in particular, was great, but the execution of her death felt a bit weird, and unintentionally funny. Now the final battle is really fun. You get to see all three of the Spider-Men fighting villains. You get them chatting and yelling banter at each other. It's pretty awesome, but there are a few moments that I didn't really care for or just made me shrug. The first is that Doc Ock helps the Spider-Man. He uses a device that Spider-Man made to help drain Electro of his powers, and it feels pretty quickly resolved. He just shows up, grabs him, puts the device on him, and that's basically it. Then after the final battle, Tom Holland is pushing Green Goblin's shit in, and it's a great scene. Then he goes to stab Goblin with the blade from his glider, but Tobey Maguire stops him, and then surprise, Tobey Maguire gets stabbed by Green Goblin from behind. It's very shocking, but then it doesn't amount to anything. He doesn't die, he's fine. He doesn't even have any marks or blood on him. It makes you wonder what was the point. I mean, it's not terrible, it just kind of left me scratching my head. Although the end credits scene I thought was pretty dumb. Okay, so here's a spoiler for Venom Let There Be Carnage. At the end of that movie, during the end credits scene, Eddie Brock is transported into the MCU universe. And on TV is J. Jonah Jameson revealing the secret identity of Spider-Man. Venom gets a hard on and starts licking the screen, and then it ends. And so it made you wonder, what role is Venom gonna play in No Way Home? Zero. He doesn't show up at all until the end credits scene, which was really lackluster. Basically, Eddie's at a bar drinking, and then he gets sent back to his own world. But then left behind is a little black piece of the symbiote, clearly hinting at the fact that at some point this symbiote can interact with Spider-Man. I mean, that's pretty cool, but it just felt very meh. So they spent 2 end credit scenes just to make sure they can set up the black suit Spider-Man later on. One in Venom 2, then one in here. It's not terrible, it's just really disappointing seeing how the end credit scene in Venom 2 didn't lead to a really cool interaction like we thought it would. The last bit of spoilers I'll talk about will be the ending. So after the final battle, the only solution to stop all these other villains from crossing over is to make sure that everyone forgets who Peter Parker is. And so that's what ends up happening. Peter ends up on his own. He doesn't have Happy or Stark technology to help him, no friends, no family. He's by himself, and the final shot of him swinging through the city in his new homemade suit made me realize something. We just watched a 3-movie origin story for Spider-Man. It retroactively made me appreciate the previous 2 a bit more. Now, honestly, it reminds me of what Snyder did with Superman, from Man of Steel to BVS to the Snyder Cut. Each movie added more things and gave the character more lessons to get them to where the fans expected them to be. And you can see that here with Tom Holland's Spider-Man as well. You start off with a young Peter Parker who just wants to do good and be a hero. Then you got him struggling to try to balance being a hero in his personal life. And then finally you got him coming into his own and being his own man. And not being able to rely on others for help like he did before. As well as finally getting the "with great power comes great responsibility" speech. He basically spent the last few years preparing to be the Spider-Man fans want him to be. Was that planned, or was that just a decision they made after the second movie? I'm not sure, but it works pretty well. And I'm really interested in seeing where he goes from here. Now that he has no one else to fall back on. He's completely solo. And I mean, isn't that what fans wanted all along anyway? Everyone kept referring to him as Iron Boy Jr. and such. But now he's at the point where fans expect him to be at the very beginning. A solo hero, broke and on his own.
Yo, I got Spider Mommies on Spider Mommies on Spider Mommies, man. And she a baddie. You single?
So overall, I really enjoyed this movie. There are some really good things here, and some really great moments. But there are a few things that aren't that great, and a bunch of little things that I'm not a fan of, but can be overlooked because I enjoyed it so much. Although I do think when the magic and nostalgia wears off, upon rewatches, people will be more critical of it and notice the issues. Now amongst the Home trilogy, I would rank it under Homecoming, but higher than Far From Home. And in my rankings of the live action movies, I would place it probably at around number 3, pushing Spider-Man 1 down to number 4, and stay right below Spider-Man Homecoming and Spider-Man 2. So that's going to do for the video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, go and drop a like on it. And leave a comment, let me know, what do you think about Spider-Man No Way Home? Is it the best Spider-Man movie? Was it overhyped garbage? Leave a comment and let me know. And thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.
You tried to kill Aunt May. You tried to kill Mary Jane.
Whoa, that's crazy. I think this is gonna be really fun, seriously. I may not know much, but I do know this. Europeans love Americans. most of my life playing video games, and we're gonna die. That's nice. It reminds me of when Benny and I first fell in love. I had just finished my fruit cobbler, right? That's fun.
Oh, the bussy. Bussy shaking is, we know where that leads.